Hello, my friends. What's happening? Get John on here in a second. We've got podcasts, or got audio versions of the first 3 episodes up, Live with Matt Rad YouTube. We have some clips and things like that. So check all that stuff out. I'm trying to make this a resource for you guys. So there's John. Whew. I don't know, we hand signal today. What's up, man? How are you?
What if we only talked with hand signals today?
I think it would be confusing because I don't really know how to communicate that way. What's going on, man? How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm getting a little bit of echo back from...
Oh, I don't have my AirPods in. You wanted to do AirPods today.
Yeah, if you can get AirPods, you get AirPods. I think the quality is a little better. I've been, I'll say at the beginning, I've been editing for audio versions of this stuff so people can go subscribe to Live with Matt Rad.
It's noticeably better with the AirPods?
I think it's better with the AirPods, yeah. Trying to transfer Instagram Live audio over to a quality podcast form has been an engineering and mixing challenge, but I ran it by you. You seem to think it sounded all right, so people can check that out. Live with Matt Rad on Apple, and I think it's on Spotify and all the other formats. And the YouTube, people should check out the YouTube because we got clips on there.
You did it.
John talking about how he doesn't compress, things like that.
Have I compressed since I said I don't compress? I think I might have once or twice.
How dare you, you fucking hypocrite.
But I haven't used an 1176 in the last couple of years, so...
Well, 1176, an old revision F is part of my vocal chain, so I use that bad boy all the time. I saw
one at your house the other day, yeah.
Yeah,
That's different. That's different.
It's a great sounding one. I use that and a little bit of a distressor sometimes, adding a little harmonic distortion. How are you doing today, man?
Great. I went up the hill again today. You got me all inspired for more intense workouts.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, it's like it's an underrated thing about what we do that I actually remember talking to a couple of friends of mine who were professional poker players, and these jobs where you're doing a lot of sitting and a lot of being in the same place. It's really an underrated thing to be in good shape. Because if you're in good shape, you can sit for longer, you can focus more, even though the job itself doesn't have a lot of athleticism in the action of the job. To be in good shape is really good. As I'm sure you would agree.
I have to highly consider my back, so this is definitely going to help with that. But I went to Palm Springs this weekend for a quick little getaway with Niku. It was really nice. And on the way there, I drove the car the whole way there, and I got there with a lot of back pain. But on the way back, I let the Tesla drive me all the way back. We got back completely on autopilot until the exit to the Arts District. So I didn't have to hit the gas pedal, or the pedal, not the gas pedal. And my back was great when I arrived back. So I'm like, I have a self-driving car, so my back doesn't hurt. But I still want to strengthen it through exercise.
Yeah, man. I mean, again, like the things that people don't talk about record making is how much you just sit. And, we talk about I'm stoked to mix today after my exercise, right? Yeah.
After this, I'm going to jump right in, and my energy is so high right now from sweating earlier and just a little bit more intense. I think my normal cardio, riding the bike around the hood, was good too, and it was just a bit more of a chill thing with maybe I'll alternate. But giving all you got going uphill on the bike or sprinting like we did, it's hard to call it sprinting on the bike. I don't know what the name of this would be. Just high intensity hill on a bike, just like digging in, standing up, and anyway, I'm feeling really good because of that, to be honest, and a refreshing break in Palm Springs.
Nice, man. Yeah, and we've talked about this before on some of these live streams. There's all kinds of technical stuff that people can talk about, but I really think the important stuff is the philosophical approach and making sure you're taking breaks, making sure your mental health is good, making sure your physical health is good. I think that's the most important stuff that people don't talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so interested in talking about that because it's new to me at 34. I would say the last couple of years is the first time I really cared about all that other stuff. I guess most of the time was getting that technical and creative aspect under my thumbs, for lack of a better term, and kind of having that go under the radar and just exist because that's what we do now. And now I'm focused on taking care of myself. So I think if people can get there a little sooner than I did, that's probably the best advice that I can even give on a talk like this. It's like maybe do it 5 years before I did.
What was the thing that got you into thinking about things outside of the technical, that got you into, I want to take care of my physical health and mental health and my psychological approach?
Well, just new knowledge that diet was so important, not only for loss of weight. If that's a big part of it for engineers. There's a lot of engineers that are overweight. We sit in a chair all day. We eat shitty food. That was something about maintaining a healthy weight, but realizing the effect that it can have on your brain. And I think that was kind of relatively new within the last 5-10 years. Science was getting deeper into that. Specifically for me was the ketogenic diet. Before it was a fad diet and all over Whole Foods and every other, grocery store. Spider and I were doing it about 5 years ago. And after a month of adaptation, or what they call fat adaptation, my brain just completely changed, and my level of focus lasted substantially longer at a high level. So for someone that's pretty ADD, or I thought I was, that kind of changed when I realized I wasn't having insulin spikes up and down. So I could last longer. Not to say that, going back to last week, we talked about breaks, maybe 45 minutes on, 15 minutes off. I'm not saying don't take breaks, but in that time where you have to go that 2 hours to hit that deadline, it's giving you extra bandwidth. So nutrition affecting my performance. I always go back to a story with Spider that he was living with me at the time when we first started doing this diet together. I think for a month or two, he was staying with me at the gift shop here. And I think I mixed 7 songs in one day. And I said it to him, I was like, dude, I just did 7 songs. He's like, I'm pretty sure you just adapted and you're in keto. Like, it was just, all of a sudden there's a different glow. So that's really what got me turned on to it, like 5 years ago, of, I can maximize my output and performance via diet. And then exercise kind of, I've always been, I played sports when I was younger, and I've always been hip to exercise, but that interplay with diet is probably within the last 5 years. But I'm not really a heavy, intense guy. Like, I don't like grunt at the gym. That wasn't always my thing, but I do lift weights. Like, now I'm realizing that after kind of hanging out with you, and this is only a week and a half old, that I think the most benefit I've gotten is in the past 2 weeks of more of kind of being more explosive than like even this morning after going up the hill a bunch, I came back and I had some free weights, and I did, I guess, what you were calling compound movements. I didn't do like single, curl things. I was doing full body from bottom to top. And, I was doing more, and I can feel different muscle groups engaging versus just the one that you would normally do, or that a lot of people are taught. So just that's really recent, and I want to go deeper into it.
Yeah. We've talked in past chats about counterbalances to things that you do to getting, whether it's, you're a mixer, but you're also a chef, and there's something about cooking, and it's a different part of the brain, but there's something that overlaps with it. It's kind of a nice counterweight to the mixing thing. And given how much we all sit around, there's certainly a sedentary lifestyle for a lot of people that are engineers, but even those of us that were super skinny kids, I still had back problems too. Because again, you're just sitting around and sleeping on couches and hustling and all that kind of shit. Or
not sleeping at all.
Not sleeping at all, yeah.
Napping
sleeping poorly on couches. Having a fitness routine, even whether it's yoga, whether it's a little bit of jogging, whether it's sprinting a hill, riding a bike, just something, stretching. Stretching is hugely important. You sit in one position in a chair all day, and there's certain hip muscles that get all tightened up, and that stuff will actually make you a much better record maker.
Yeah, exactly. And you're sitting at the computer and you think that your neck is hurting, but the neck pain is coming from tension in the lower back or the quads, or so. It's coming from somewhere else. The neck isn't really the culprit here. So understanding that and finding out where that access point is to relieving that pain from stretching, there's so much to go down to simply sit in front of a computer and last all day and not get frustrated, because the minute you feel uncomfortable, that's going to affect your, the way you communicate, right, with your client, with the artist, with whoever it is. And you never want that. You never want something that you're feeling negatively, that you're so unaware of. You're not examined enough in how you're supposed to feel in that moment, and you take it out on a client, you might never get the call back, right? So when I talk about maximizing productivity, output, performance, it's also communication and not being frustrated when, like, yesterday was a very frustrating day on a mix. Something I really like a project I really like, but it's like 15 versions in, and most of the notes aren't even mix notes. They're arrangement notes. They're just out of my jurisdiction theoretically. But because we're so far in, to change the arrangement, I'm not going to remix the song that's already been approved. Now there's 3 different features on the song. We've gone through. 2 of them are making it, but there's a version that has 1 feature on it. The version that has 2. A version that has 1 feature with the backgrounds of the second. Like, it's just so frustrating. But Josh, my assistant, and I stayed so focused over the past few days. Him while I was in Palm Springs, and then me when I got back. Right, like I didn't once get frustrated with the client. I got frustrated with the whole idea that this was even happening, and that's not what I'm getting paid to do. But that's for me to figure out and me to absorb and take in, not to project back and reflect onto them, because they're just, this is what they think needs to be done, or this is what needs to be done for them. So I have to make sure that I am nourished and I'm not hangry. And I did my routine, so I took care of myself in the morning before it's time to take care of them, right? So that's why this all matters. We've talked about nutrition a lot. I take that very seriously. I do think that a lot of people can exist at the highest level despite all of that and eat fast food all the time. I'd argue I don't know if they can do that into their 50s, 60s, 70s and on, but maybe now they can. So I'm not saying this is one size fits all. No diet is one size fits all in general, and no routine is one size fits all. But to model a version of what could be, routine is completely, I would say, the most important part of my creative process.
Yeah, and I think at the very least, everyone should explore those things, because diet, exercise, those things affect your performance. What we do or what other people do may not work for you, but something's going to be optimal for you. Dude, shout out baby Jake in the comments going ham.
I know.
I love you, Jake. I miss you.
I'm trying not to get distracted by
I know. He's just so large and handsome. How can you not?
I know.
I wanted to ask you, have you, a friend of mine, Dave Rosen, is an amazing film composer, and he was a guitarist in a band, the Parlor Mob, that I worked with years ago. A good friend of mine, he uses a standing desk now. Have you messed with any of that stuff? Have you, like, the idea of not sitting?
I haven't, because my speakers are dialed into a position that works for me, right? That's the thing about mixing. I mean, as a producer, if I had small speakers and I had them on a desk, maybe I'd still argue that's not ideal. Yeah. I don't know. I have to talk more with Spider and Rory about that, because I'm actually curious if that's possible. I'd have to have a movable speaker stand that can.
You have to have a whole rig that went up and down, and then you're changing the relationship with the standing waves and things like that.
Yes, and because of how much power is in my tweeter and the PMCs that I have, if I'm standing and that tweeter goes direct into my ear, I mean, that's potentially hazardous at certain volumes, right? So no.
Do you have it set up so that the tweeters are in a different place than your ears?
Well, yeah, they're way above my ears.
Way above, yeah.
Way above. So they disperse into the room, right? And not directly to your. No tweeter should go directly to your ear. That's bad for ears. When I see cars with a tweeter like on the panel to the right, like directly in your ear, that's not good.
My Toyota used to have that. That shit was bright.
Yeah, exactly. Toyotas were doing that exactly. So bright. I've on a quick side note, I've lowered my tweeter or the treble in my Tesla like 6 dB. For anybody else that has Teslas, that shit's way too bright. It sounds really exciting and really great. Turn that treble down. I mean, if you put sicko mode on, it just rips your ear off. Like, you're going to have hearing damage if you listen to sicko mode at flat in a Tesla by default. Just be careful. It's all just a quick PSA there.
I chose my car that I leased a couple years ago, and then again last year, right, 3 years ago, and then last year, based on the sound system.
Yeah, same.
I listened to 8 different sound systems. Just pick that. Yeah, the standing desk thing is interesting. I've thought about that a lot. I know some people that are starting to do that, and it's man. I mean, if we're talking this much about back problems and sitting, I'd be interested to see, especially talking to like the PMC folks that you know real well and other speaker companies, if they have thought about that as if anybody on watching these things works for a monitor company, speaker company, let's chat, because I'm interested in figuring out a solution for that, because I'd love not to sit for hours and hours.
I would think you can do this like for two separate tasks, right? You could have an edit height and a mix height, right? Or a vibe height and a critical height if you're producing. Maybe you want to stand up when you're comping a vocal or doing mundane edits. Maybe you're declicking something or you're moving arrangement. You're not doing critical
or you're just writing. I mean, if you're not mixing or mastering, having a variable speaker position might not be a bad thing.
Yes, exactly. So I think for that purpose, like I have, I forgot who I was talking to about this. Oh, I think it was Rory on our recent podcast. The idea of having a second mastering rig for a mastering engineer to do edits and sequencing and not listening, and having that a standing desk or somewhere, or just somewhere else where when you're in the zone mixing or mastering, that you're sitting there, that's for creative moves. That's for critical and creative moves. Then the editing is done somewhere completely off site from that, which is, I think last week we talked about how I have actually, again, I'm kind of getting sometimes confused because we do the podcast recordings on our end on Wednesday.
Yeah, we'll talk about the same stuff. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. We do. There's so much overlap. That's why. But something we recorded last week is how I have a meditation chair. Like I sit by my window, by one of my windows, and that's where I meditate all the time. Now, because I'm conditioned to do that there, when I sit in that chair, no matter what I'm doing, I don't bring my phone over. That's an automatic relaxation for me. And studies have shown a lot about sleep in the bedroom. If you have nothing else going on in that bedroom and that's where you sleep, you're going to fall asleep faster as soon as you get there, and you're going to sleep longer. The minute you have an iPad in there or your phone or a TV and you're watching movies, your body and your brain are confused on what am I supposed to do in this space. So I think that's cool, thinking about that parallel to in your creative zone, your studio, and your digital environment that we talked about last time too.
Yes,
that's where you're doing this task. So maybe you need another place to do another task, and that's okay, and figure that out. Like your assistant setup where editing is happening, maybe you go there to do some vocal comping, and maybe that desk is a standing desk because you don't have to be critical on where the speakers are in that. So I think there's a lot of ways to think about it, but I would think about it more specifically on task-based positioning in your space and in multi-spaces.
I like the idea of having, I realize I totally have that. I have a piano over here and I have keyboards that don't really have any graphical interface over here. I got like Juno, Prophet, Minimo, the Voyager, and even where I set up my laptop, because I run everything off a new MacBook Pro. I don't have a tower or anything like that. But then over here I have the separate screen. So I have like my sitting position here, my listening position if I'm mixing, tweaking, doing that sort of thing. But then I can actually stand up and be on my laptop, which sort of feels separate, puts a little different creative thing in my brain. If I'm sitting in front of the analog synths, my brain does different things. The idea of having different stations, obviously mixing is sort of a different thing, but if I'm writing, producing, creating, just getting into different modes psychologically because of the space has been really important for me.
Yeah,
really important.
So important. I guess it's different in mixing, but I would just equate the mixing with the editing. And if you're doing vocal breath editing, lower your speakers, maybe find a way to stand up, maybe just before you even do it, take a pause, right? I think about my Waking Up app, Sam Harris meditation practice, as it's daily, and not daily in a sense of, yes, I do it every morning and every night. It lasts throughout the day. Before a new task, take a pause. It could be one deep breath. It could be 10. It can be a 5-minute meditation. It can be 30 seconds. It just bring awareness to the next task. And that might be in a separate space, but you could theoretically, I guess this is meta, but you can be in the same but different space at a different time, depending on your head space.
It's resetting. It's a little reset. So even stepping back, taking a breath. There was someone in the comments, it cycled through, so I couldn't see, but they said they do all their editing on headphones just because it's a different thing. And then you can stand up, you can have a different body posture. And then when you get back into your mix position, then you're back in that mode.
Yeah.
Those things are crucial.
Modes of the creative process. And yes, standing desk, and I love that's been the impetus for this conversation. I think that's really cool as a potential part of it. And I think more research needs to be done in that. There are speaker stands and desks that raise and lower. We know that exists. I would say that I would stand behind this, that you can do that for editing, and then you should lower it for critical listening. So I think that's kind of the answer, if we're giving an answer at this point.
Yeah, having one position that's tuned where the speakers sound the most even, or however it's shot for the room, that sort of thing, and then you can move them accordingly if you're standing up and doing other things.
But I really like the practice, and this is meditation practice, but the practice of punctuating your day with pauses, and that's kind of changed my life since the practice started. Is okay, I'm going to do this task now. Let me step back. Let me just step out of myself for a second, look at the objective, now, what's happening, what do I would hope to get done in the next certain amount of time, like just punctuate. And that's helped me so much. And I think that understanding that and the differences in your space, whether small or large, can really unlock a lot to the creative process.
Yeah, I just remember this. I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but back when I was like in my early 20s and working at Eric Valentine's spot, which by the way, did you see it's for sale?
Crazy. Yeah,
Crazy.
I know.
And it's a whole nother conversation.
I know.
You got $4.5 million bucks. You want to buy that place with me?
I don't. I don't.
By the way, there you go. It's interesting. If anybody's got $4.5 million and they want to buy a historic studio in the middle of Hollywood that I worked at for 10 years, it's an amazing spot. It's interesting stuff. I talked to him a week or two ago and caught up with him, but for another conversation. I just remembered that when I was in my early 20s, when I was mixing. What was I mixing? I think I was mixing the Matches' second record, and my breaks, because I realized my body was deteriorating sitting in a studio for 16 hours a day. So I would take a break every hour or two, and I would walk up the stairs to the upstairs lounge area, and I would do 10 push-ups, and then I'd walk back down the stairs, and that was my break.
That's enough.
And it was amazing.
Enough.
It changed my ability to have long days and things like that. It was fucking great.
Well, you're resetting. You're getting blood rushing back to the brain. I mean, that's the thing. We get tired for multiple reasons. I mean, lack of blood to the brain, and depending on where insulin is at, if we're on a carbohydrate, glucose-based diet, right? So we have these natural flows that are occurring. And thinking about kind of all the stuff we're talking about so far today, it really brings me back to the how long can you last in a productive state of mind? And when you're creative, you want to stay in that flow as much as possible. When you're a mixer and you're finishing things, or a mastering engineer, and you're in charge of finishing, there's somewhat more of a technical approach, and we have to complete things by a certain time. So it's not always flow state. For me, I would argue that it mostly is, but that's what I'm trying to maintain as much as possible, is that, and that these are techniques and kind of life hacks to maximize output. Then that question goes into how many hours you need to work in a day. If you're more effective for 8 than a procrastinating 16, I'm going to hit the 8. I'm going to hit the 8 and then watch a movie or cook myself or my girlfriend or friend's dinner, and then just take a step back so the next day I can do that hard 8 again. Yeah. Instead of a soft 16 every day where not as much gets done. I don't really see the benefit of that anymore in my life, of the hustle and grind every day. I think I just get more done in a shorter amount of time because I'm aware of my limits in that.
I was saying the other day to somebody that the sort of the arc of learning, or all systems, is that at the beginning you don't know very much. I was talking to an artist, I think yesterday. It's for learning how to make records, learning languages, building complex systems of any kind, where when you start out you don't know that much, and then it gets really, really complicated, You put in lots of hours, put in lots of time. You're trying to grab at everything. And then at a certain point, you've absorbed enough of the information that you start reducing and getting more and more efficient. And, you know, and ultimately mastery is about the process of making it super efficient. And there's going to be various people watching these things that are in various states of their mastery of mixing or writing or producing or whatever. But, you know, when you're starting out, it really is like, it kind of does make sense to spend way too many hours and overdo it and learn too many things and try a bunch of unnecessary shit for a while and copy a bunch of other people. And then at a certain point, you start going, okay, I have a handle on all of these complicated things. Don't need that much of this. Don't need that much of this. I mean, when you and I talk about, you know, your approach to mixing, like I would assume the ideal mix process for you is to do like 7 things on the whole mix, 7 little adjustments, or maybe 3, or maybe just 1. And then you've achieved something.
I would like you to elaborate on that, because I would think that I make 7,000 small adjustments that add up to one thing, one move. I don't know how to think about that, to be honest.
Well, so like, okay,
there's thousands of minor adjustments.
Are those minor adjustments things that you consciously do, or it's sort of a part of your setup and your flow?
Well, that's a good question. I guess we consciously do everything if you're conscious of it. Meaning I could be conscious of every move and say, oh, look at that, I just EQ'd this. I don't do that. Yeah. I got into a pretty awesome debate and argument with Spider a couple weeks ago about how we constantly make value judgments of, is this good? Was that good or bad? Is that better or worse? And I don't think about things like that. I make them, I make the decisions, and then I move forward. I don't think every time. But what his point is, well, under the hood, you're doing that. You made that EQ move and you decided to leave it and move on. Now, I could consciously come back to the move and say, yes, that boost was better. I don't see value in acknowledging something was better or worse. I see that it played a part across the journey of from start to finish of this song, making me get to a more desired result. So yes, you can argue that it is now better than, but there's no empirically better choice to have made, because in context, it could be worse for the source signal, right? I could be thinning out the bass, so it is it did not improve the bass, but it improved the way the bass fit into the mix, right? So there's too many ways to express value judgments here. So I don't do that. So I don't consciously think about did I improve it or not. I just move on to the next thing. Simply move on and hope at the end of the day or end of the process of a few hours, I like the result. And if not, I start over. I don't go try to backtrack on what moves I made necessarily. I'm just like, oh, I guess it didn't work this time, and let's go. Then granted, as I get better and better at my craft and understanding, like that happens less and less. And I would say that happens like 1% of the time at this point. But along the journey, I always did that. I would always like, all right, let me just start over. I would just close the session, do a new save as from the beginning, and start again. So I don't think of my moves so independently from each other. It's one big, I guess it's like a sculpture. You're like chiseling away at the concrete until a shape is formed. And that shape...
Go ahead. So I'm sorry.
No, that shape can be something that you were aware of in the beginning that you're trying to create. Like I could be trying to create a vase, but all of a sudden a serving bowl might come out of it. Like we don't really know I don't always know what it's going to be, but I'd like to think that I know with some degree what I'm trying to shape. Yeah.
Well, so this is an interesting topic. I never really thought about this before. That do you maybe the ultimate goal on some level is to, I think I said this before, maybe equate it to like boxers or something. You learn slowly how to punch and the mechanics of your hips as you pull into the punch and whatever. And then but when you're in the boxing ring, nobody's thinking, I'm going to turn my hips. The training is embedded in you. So you're going to go mix something you've been mixing for a long time. You're doing things essentially on instinct, where you're reaching for things without thinking like, I'm now going to use this tube thing because I know that it will probably, you're just doing it because you've done it so much. But then when it doesn't work and you go, okay, I'm starting from scratch. Presumably then you have to think about what process led me to this thing that doesn't work.
That's fair.
How do you unpack that?
Yeah, that's fair.
Because I agree. I mean, I'm always trying to just work on instinct, and I fail at it all the time. But the ultimate goal, I think, of almost any creative thing is to work and just kind of breathe it out. Like, it's the John Coltrane thing. If you don't live it, it doesn't come through the horn. Like he's just speaking the language. And I want to do that for production. You do that for mixing. But then if something's not working, then you have to go into training problem solving mode.
Well, there's usually one anecdote to that problem, and it's I did too much. So my second approach is usually doing less, and then it's usually right. So I
like that a lot.
It's very rare that I get that this happens twice. That epic fail of that was not the right approach happens the second time. So I think the first approach is, I did too much. Let me walk it back. But instead of walking it back little by little, let's start again and do less and see what happens.
So it really is the solution. Would you say the solution is almost always it needs to be simpler?
Yeah, I think so. I think at every majority of the time.
I think that's the case for me too, on the production side, on the songwriting side. I mean, how many people, I think the number one problem for all quote unquote pro songwriters, but all artists that write songs, I think everybody overwrites, because everybody thinks that writing the simple melody or the simple lyric, you're in a room and you're talking about it over and over. And, my example is always James Blunt, "You're beautiful." Like if you come in and pitch that chorus to somebody and you go, "Hey, I got this hit chorus," the lyric goes, "You're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful. It's true."
It's a hit.
It's a hit. Like, that's a hit. We got it. What a genius thing. But there's something about the emotion of it and the simplicity of it that makes it so powerful. And even though he's like a goofy art guy and a funny artist, and maybe, I don't know if he's a one-hit wonder, if he had other hits or whatever, but like there's something really powerful about being able to be that simple. And I think everybody overwrites. I always overmix. I over EQ. I overdo everything.
There's a lot there. With that song as the example, I mean, very few artists could say those lyrics in the same tone as he did and it be as believable, right? Yeah. So there's the performance and the delivery of the quirkiness of his voice works. I mean, I believe Bruno Mars had a song that's, Just the Way You Are, right? Like Billy Joel also had the same Just the Way You Are song. Like two songs were both hits at different times with believable artists with unique tone of voice singing those lyrics. So we could have another You Are Beautiful coming.
There's three songs called Let Me Love You that were number one songs in I think a 10 or 12 year period.
Right. So it's the connection. How many versions of that song have been written though in Los Angeles? Like
totally.
That didn't get heard. So, but let's jump back to overwriting. Everyone overwrites. Most people overwrite. Most people overproduce. Most people overmix. Most recording engineers who are comping over-edit the vocal performance, and then the artist comes back into the room and says, "Wait, where did all the feel go? Why is it so?" And then you realize it's micro-edited and it's all graded. And everyone has that learning experience. I'm extremely lucky to have learned from Tony Maserati. Right. When Tony's mixing, there are a lot of sounds, there are a lot of tracks in Pro Tools that do not have any plugins on them, right? Mm-hmm. So I got really lucky to watch one of the masters and wizards of what I do not do anything to a sound for the final mix. He maybe grabbed the fader and did some rides. He might have left it alone because that sound did not need to be changed once he messed with another sound that was, sharing the same space. I have a hard time with that because I'm a geek and I'm a tweaker. So I used to, until I met him, put a plugin or 10 on every track. Now, since I met him and since I've kind of dialed in and understood my aesthetic that I'd like to bring to a record, either minor or major, not minor or major level of record, how much I am doing to the record. Am I having a minor involvement or a major contribution to it? I now have tracks that have 0 plugins on them. And it's not laziness. It's understanding that thing feels right. Mm. It feels right for what it is. And it feels right in the greater picture of it all. So I think that's important to recognize in all aspects. Is the lyric right? Does it convey the emotion that the songwriter or the artist was trying to convey? Then it's done. Now, when you write the second verse, after you have the hook and the story twists away from maybe the resolve or the tension that the chorus is supposed to give you, then maybe it needs to be reassessed, or maybe that second verse isn't right because now it's not telling the same story. Like there are reasons that you have to go back, like I've brought up in the mixing realm. Okay, I made that bass move and it worked in the first chorus, second verse, first verse. And once you get to the bridge and then another bass comes in, it's like, ooh, maybe that bass needs to change because this new texture is coming in. Like it has to work throughout the song and throughout the story, whether it's in the songwriting or the mixing of the record. So it has to work from start to finish to some degree, and it needs to be open to being changed throughout. But still, the minimum effective dose is what we want. Yeah. Right? That's like, so anyway, that's my thought on that.
I think is maybe the point I was trying to get at earlier, which maybe I didn't quite say right. It really is like a certain kind of confidence that is required for simplicity. And if you can get something right in the simplest way, that's the biggest win. And that's why you have multiple songs with the same titles, because there's only a few emotions that are really coming through in popular music, because what you're really writing is a universal experience that's specific to you, and people connect to the emotion. Yeah. And sometimes you just got to say, let me love you, or just the way you are, or whatever it is, or you're beautiful. And people are going to keep writing those songs because it turns out that's the fundamental thing. And you can write the cleverest thing in the world. There's a David Foster, a YouTube video of him at like a BMI or ASCAP awards thing. And he's given his 10 pieces of advice for songwriters, and a couple of them are funny, like save your money and don't get married unless you absolutely want to, because he's like 3 of my ex-wives are here, that sort of thing. It's a great video. But he says, don't be precious with your ideas. There's 26 letters and 12 notes, and Shakespeare and Beethoven already did it better than all of us. So don't be precious with your things. Just speak from your heart and go from there.
I want to jump back to you used the word confidence. I want to try to be transparent here with that, because that really resonates with me. I was never confident, and I thought that confidence was something that you either are born with or not. And I recently realized over the last 4 or 5 years that I'm referred to now by other people that just meet me as confident. And I'm like, oh yeah, I am confident to some degree. And I really think it's something, I think Eric Weinstein talks about this on one of his podcasts, like maybe earlier this year, about that you could learn it. It's something that can be taught and practiced. And I don't think that's inherent in all aspects of your life. You're all of a sudden the most confident at everything. But I learned how to be confident in what I do because I was projected that way by others. So there has to be some truth to it, right? Like if 300 people have paid me to mix their record and come back a second time, they must think that I'm good at something. So what is the benefit of the self-deprecating point of view that I upheld to say, oh, I'm not good at this. We're constantly always getting better. If you're not, then this conversation is not for you. Like we're constantly learning, but at some point we are good, right? And I want to tell the world that if you don't think you are confident, you can become confident in certain aspects. I am by no means I have not unlearned all my self-deprecating devalues.
Well, part of I'm debating telling an interesting anecdote from my life. That the interesting thing about confidence is less about thinking that you're great and more about being okay being wrong. Because I have a lot of confidence in a lot of the things that I do, making a move on a EQ or a lyric idea or any of that sort of stuff. There's many times in my life when I've not been confident, but I'm also okay to be like, hey, I got this great idea, and everybody goes, awesome. And then we try it and I go, that sucked. Let's move on.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's confidence. The first time I hung out with Rick Rubin when I was like 19, when the Matches were getting attention, rock band that I grew up with and worked on their first few records. I remember hanging out with Rick Rubin, who was a big hero of mine. And I remember him talking about working with young bands versus old bands, or like older artists that had a lot of experience. And he said, the older artists are the ones that are much more likely to experience, to try new ideas and experiment with new sounds and different kinds of things because they had the confidence of age. And it was sort of confusing to me. And I said, well, I don't, what does that mean? He said, well, a young artist, a young band doesn't really know who they are. So they're scared to be something and be put into a category because they don't have a center that they really know what they're doing. But when you work with someone, like a Tom Petty or somebody like that, when he was working on those records, those guys are down to try whatever because they know that if it doesn't work, they go, this doesn't work for me. Let me go back to the thing that I do. Yeah, so there is something about being willing to try things and do things that has a relationship to confidence that I think is really interesting. It really is about trying things and being okay, being wrong, being confident with ideas and then being like, that didn't work. I mean, if you're a very confident mixer, sometimes you do something and it doesn't work and you go, all right, okay, well, let me try a slightly different approach. But you go into it confidently. Yeah. Yeah. An interesting topic. I'll tell one other little thing. I think I was, throughout my career up until maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was always the young guy. I was always the young guy in the local scene. Even like the Matches guys that I mentioned, they were a couple years older than me. I was always the young guy. And what that means is that, one, I don't really know what I'm doing compared to people who, if I'm 15 and there's a bunch of 20-year-olds, I got treated like shit a lot in studios. I got kicked out of things because I was some kid and all that kind of stuff. So I built up this sort of survival mechanism for basically always asking people advice, always trying to really step back and be humble, trying to get all the information from someone. I started getting hired for gigs, even after I was working with Eric and doing some stuff on my own. I'd always be like, give me all the notes, give me too many notes, tell me every little thing that you want so I can get it exactly right. Because again, like the young guy mentality. And I remember the first thing I worked on, I just talked to him a little bit yesterday, Tyler Brown, who is the day-to-day A&R for One Direction. When the first thing I worked on with him, the song Best Song Ever, that became a big hit. It was like my first thing in pop music. It's how I became a pop producer. I did spec production for them, and that finished that song with him, and it was great. And I had asked him for all kinds of thoughts and feedback. Sorry, my battery's getting low, but we'll be fine. And worked on it with him, got the song off. Everybody was really happy. It was going to be the first single. It was a whole big thing. And then he asked me to work on a second song on the album. And he sent me the song and he said, it's kind of a last minute thing. We need it done in the next couple of days. And so I'm like panicking a little bit. I've never turned around a production. And I think I turned around that production in 24 hours. Right. I may have told you at one point about that was the song. It was the second song I did for One Direction. It was a song on their deluxe version of that album. It wasn't a single or anything, but I had 24 hours to turn it around. And I asked him and I said, what do you want? Give me the details. Give me the info. Like, tell me exactly what you want. Can you just you can write me paragraphs. I don't care. And he's like, bro, I want you to do your thing where I'm hiring you. Right. And I was like, oh, I'm now the guy in charge. Not that my ego didn't go crazy, but I was just like, it's time for me to have confidence and trust myself because I'm being hired to get this across the finish line. And I just did it for him. So I actually do know kind of what they like. Yes. Okay. It's time to understand that that's my job. And I think a lot of people who do what we do, whether it's you're a songwriter, you're an artist, you're a mixer, you're a producer, whatever it is, we have a lot of insecurity and have a lot of, recognizing the people we are inspired by, who are these beautifully successful, these records that inspire us, as people that have a big long career, and we perceive them as geniuses. And the truth is that there's a point at which we're all kind of doing the same thing. And I was talking to somebody yesterday and saying that, look, 90% of the stuff I make isn't very good, because that's what being a writer producer is. You just make lots of bad ideas. You just make a lot of shit. And it's the confidence to know that, okay, so if 10% of my stuff is good, instead of freaking out about 9 things not being good, just make 10 more and 20 more and 100 more, and the good stuff will come out. Confidence on some level comes from just the experience of going through it and realizing that you can make mistakes, you can make lots of bad things, people can not like what you're doing, and then you just keep going and you make more stuff. I mean, the answer to it's sort of like free speech or something. The answer to bad speech is more speech. The answer to bad songs is write more songs. I mean, if you watch the Ed Sheeran documentary, he talks about this. It's like write 2 or 3 songs a day for 5 years. It doesn't matter if they're all bad. You'll have written a couple thousand songs. You'll be a good songwriter by that point. You just will. Like you put in the time and it's the confidence to put in the time. Yeah. Anyway, there's my long monologue for the day.
There's so much there. I want to jump way back to the beginning.
Go, please.
Of you saying you were the young guy in the room. To the young people in the room now, I wish that I was able to recognize why I was in the room as the young person. Right? It's easier in retrospect to think why the first studio owner that gave me an internship didn't ask me to pick up food or take out garbage. He always asked me to be in the room. He said, pointed at me, it's something about you. I think you need to be in the room. Just go in the room. And I can thank him for that now if I ever cross paths with him. But at the time, I was like, cool, they get to be in the room. But there's a reason why people invest in certain people, right, and allow you to be in the room. So I think it's worth at a young age recognizing that people are taking an interest in you, and that can help build little bits of confidence along the way. The minute it gets to arrogance and that you know better than that person that asked you to be in the room, that's when there's a problem, because you should always respect your elders. And there's a lot to learn, even if you don't think there is. There absolutely is. So screw you if you don't think that. But I think I wish that I recognized earlier that there was a reason why I was in the room. And I think now I was the guy picking up food.
I picked up food.
I'm only saying that because I got very lucky. And there were 4 other people in the studio every day with me that were picking up the food and sitting in the lounge. And I got to be in watching engineers mix different genres of music. And I noticed that their fader levels were at different places on the console because they were hitting the saturation and the board differently, because it was a folk record or a jazz record versus a rock record versus a hip hop record. Like, all these different types. So I gained so much at such an early age by being in the room that's unparalleled. But I got lucky, right? So now I'm able to bring awareness to my luck and try to plead with people to be open and get out of your own way to recognize that. So when you're asked to do that One Direction 24-hour turnaround, or for me, everyone has a similar story. I've had that story a few times over with Tony, but I have one specifically that I can think of, kind of like now this is on you to do. And that happened with Nicki Minaj with me. And like, I had just got in a car accident 2 to 3 months prior to that. And I was on a lot of pain meds. I was on Percocet. I broke my sternum, my chest, and I couldn't get off the couch. And I got a call to mix Nicki Minaj. And at that point, I was still kind of hit or miss with bigger artists. I was kind of only working on kind of new artists on labels, and I didn't have any big A-list besides, like, I think Macklemore at that time on my own. And I was asked, I needed to turn it around in 2 hours, because she was going the following morning to Zane Lowe on Apple Music, like on her Queen radio at the time, to announce her album. And they had one more song that needed to be mixed for the album. And I was on Percocet, and I was like, oh shit. Yeah, I can do it. And I said yes. And then, long story short, she loved that so much that they asked me to do 2 more, but I had an hour to mix 2 before the deadline of it coming out. So I was up all night, but I was like, oh, I'm not going to overthink this. Quickly recognized, wait, they're asking me to do 2 more because they liked what I did to that one. So instead of thinking, oh my God, am I going to mess this up? It was do it again 2 more times. And I wound up getting 2 on the album. The third one made the deluxe, but we didn't make the deadline in time. Like, I think I think I made it by the deadline that they told me, but something happened along the way. Like, it was whatever. But point was, I didn't overthink it. I said to myself, no, they want this. They just got this from you. She decided to give you 2 more. So do that again, and she's going to be happy, right? So it's in that moment where I realized, no, they're coming to you for this. And that can change. Different artists are going to want different things from you. But in that, it's every time that needs to be recognized. They're coming to you. Do what you do. If it doesn't work out, they don't like it, it's not personal. That's you at least put your best version of yourself forward. And that's what you did on those records. And that's why you got hired and then continuously got hired afterwards. You know, I can't imagine at our level on those records trying to copy what someone else did and it worked. They could just go to that person. Like One Direction can hire Max Martin. I always go back to that. Like, why are you going to try to pull a Max Martin and not a Matt Rad? Like Max Martin can do Max Martin better than you're ever going to do Max Martin. Why try? So you did you and you got the gig, and I did me and I got the gig. So that's the, I wish that was the advice that I was hearing on Pensado's Place or Mix with the Masters, instead of like, here's my tip and trick for the day. And this is what I use on the 808. And it's no, just be you. It's simply that over and over again until you can't help but be you. And it sounds so kind of general and vague. It's like, we only can be us, but no, you actually like need to really understand your voice, your aesthetic, what you have to offer. So when people are coming for it, you can't do anything else but that, because that's what they want. And then you win. And you win to a degree, and then you have to become relevant again. You got to maintain relevance. It's another conversation. Yeah. But to at some point, there's a respect level in your field that people at least know they're going to get the potential of success by hiring you. That percentage, that's an objective number that a label or a manager is looking for. Like, okay, if we in this 24th hour send Matt Rad this guitar and vocal, the chances of us getting something we like is higher than this guy, right? Like higher than this girl. Like this is the best chance that we possibly can get in this hour. We're going to get him to do it because his success rate has proven that way. And that's very, very important to understand.
And people should understand that this is if you're producing a record for your friend, it's the same thing. Your friend's getting you to produce it because presumably you know what you're doing, and you don't have to know what you're like. On some level, I never know what I'm doing, but I'm still. But I understand that.
Yes, you do.
But this is what I'm saying is that I know enough stuff, and maybe I know a little bit more than a few other people, and maybe I've made a few records, and if I don't have it exactly right, because I feel like everybody, maybe you don't have this, everybody's got a little imposter syndrome. Because if you feel like,
I definitely do.
If you feel like you've figured somebody said in the comments, if you feel like you've figured everything out, you're kind of done. Like there's a never ending journey to continue to learn things and get better and be inspired. But whoever you're making records with, go after the thing that excites you. That's the reason you're there. And if it doesn't work, then you go to the next thing. But you have to start there.
We talked one month at one of the live conversations about imposter syndrome. That was the main kind of topic of the night too. And that one for me is, I mean, everyone has it. We're all going to have it. Every creative human, if you don't, you're lying to yourself, I would say to some degree. I'm just wondering, and this is for another conversation and like a long form, probably 3-hour conversation on this. I wonder what the utility is of it, of reminding yourself that you're not as good as that other person. And you'll never be like, you're always like, I think you could, and I'm just working this out in my head now. I don't really.
Oh man, I have so many thoughts on this. We have to do 3 hours on this. I've thought about this so much.
But one direct thought that comes to mind is you could simply view yourself as constantly growing and getting better versus taking the 2 steps back to say, damn, I suck. I'm not that good. I need to get better, right? That's the same inherent outcome. You're going to say I suck so you get better, or you can say I can always be better, right? And that's a language and a framing that I think is really important. So to say that you are an imposter and you don't belong here versus I belong here, but I want to continue to belong here, I think that I don't think, like OG Volta just said, I don't think we need a daily self beatdown. I don't think that's the only way. If that works for you, that's cool. But I think that we can beat that and constantly.
I think a lot of people feel like that.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that that's a necessity for growth.
No, I would say people probably feel that, but don't know how to get out of it. And I think that's a bit of what we're talking about. But yeah, we have to do several hours on this.
So we have 5 minutes left. Should we answer any? We just kind of went in. Is there a question? We can pick one question and just like kind of end on a random question.
There was a bunch of good questions. Let me see. I'll just read a few and you can jump in. How much do mics and preamps matter? Can a great mixer take?
No gear.
Talked about this. Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. No gear. Think we can talk about that another time. Yeah. It's a topic that you and I discussed a little bit, talking about it last week. We didn't end up doing it, but like, how do you get your things out in the world? Expanding the network of A&R and publishers. The idea of like how to release things and how to get things out in the world. I think that's probably that's a long conversation too. Somebody asked about parallel compression.
No techniques. Anything else?
Somebody asked what factors make for a well-recorded vocal.
The emotion is conveyed. The noise floor is extremely low and non-distracting.
Oh, somebody asked on here. What once you consider yourself good, which by the way, it's only about that. How do you get better? We talk about mentorship. This is a perfect segue. You can go on the YouTube channel. We talked about this on one of the first episodes about mentorship and professionalism. There's a clip on the YouTube channel, Live with Matt Rad. But to answer it, I think the answer is yes to all of that. Mentorship, internship. I think
peer review. Get reactions from people that are in your field and not.
Yeah, I definitely, the idea of what we do as a collaborative thing, even if you're a mixer, it's part of the reason you and I are doing this. I mean, how do I get better is I talk to my friends like Jon, and the reason we're doing this is because this is how I get better at making records. This is how you get better at making records. Yeah. YouTube name, Live with Matt Rad. Live with Matt Rad. But I talk to my record maker friends and I ask them questions and we nerd out about stuff. And now I try stuff. I think about, you talked last week a lot about filtering things out in the mix, and I spend so much time on individual sounds, and you're like, I never mix with individual sounds, and I'm doing production, and so some of that stuff's different where I'm really focusing on, I want to make a cool guitar sound that I'm going to build around. But in the mixing process, that you don't ever really solo things to shape them ever is a really interesting thing conceptually for me. So one of the ways that I get better is I nerd out with Jon. I'm going to try to talk to some other friends in this format, because I love this. And the idea of doing this with Jon, like we're doing right now, is so that you guys can watch what we do, and hopefully you get some information. Hopefully it inspires you to have conversations with your friends. I mean, this is all we do all the time, is we talk about sprinting hills and how it affects our ability to, sit for long hours and mix. And we talk about food and how it relates to art. And, this is the process of how we get better, I think. I mean, better as people, better as record makers. And it's fun because you get
mostly
to hang out with your friends.
People. Becoming a better person will inform the way that you create and the way people react to you in your creations. And they're going to want to work with you again. And we're only as good as our next project, right? Like, we need to continuously get hired by people, and Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to give credit to Lee Miles Music for shouting out your headband, because that is a fire headband. And correcting my name spelling. Thank you.
That's right. That's good. That's good shit. We got a $1.40 left. We can call it here. There's a bunch of other good questions, and I apologize.
Yeah,
that we didn't
come
get
back.
To them.
No, we got in. We went in. It was great.
Yeah, we went in. There's a lot of good like career arc type questions, and that's the thing that you and I were talking about on the phone a week or two ago. About maybe we do an episode and talking about mixers and producers and the arc of a career, and finding what the thing is that you're good at and what really speaks to you.
Specialization. And when to do so. I don't really have a solid answer for that, and I'd like to work that out with a lot of people. You being one of them.
Cool. Well, we got a minute left here, so let's just call it here, man. Love you very much. Good to see you. Let me know when you want to sprint. Love the headband.
Thanks. I want to sprint again this week. I'm going to hit you up. I'm going to go play tennis tomorrow morning with my manager, though. I'm pumped about that.
That's a great sentence. I'm glad that sentence exists in the world. Thank you guys for watching. It'll be on IGTV, YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff. And hit us up with feedback. Peace, guys.
Peace.